Yeah. So I'm Hydroplane. Just to start for the recording piece. Last was the beginning of September. Duzzy gave a presentation on the Windows subsystem for Linux, and they always say that this year will be the year of Linux on the desktop. Well, maybe not the way you expected it to, right? So it's interesting to see that Linux is coming kind of into the stuff like maybe you didn't come to Linux, Linux came to you, and that's kind of the Windows subsystem for Linux, and what we're going to talk about tonight, which is basically Crostini, which is the Windows subsystem inside ChromeOS. Now, before we get going, who here has either used or owns a ChromeOS device? So a fair representation. Okay, ChromeOS. Let's go ahead and talk about the 800-pound gorilla. It's a Google thing. So from a privacy perspective, you know who you're working with, right? Okay, that's fair. I mean, we did talk about Microsoft last time, and they have their own history, right? So I'm not, we'll put aside that we're on top of Google stuff, but we're aware of that. So a little history on ChromeOS, just because it paints the context and the implementation here. Chrome. Does anyone remember when they first saw a Chromebook device, like the time frame when you went to Best Buy and there was like a Chromebook there? No, what's this new strange magic?
2012.
That's about the right time you're starting to see it. It was announced, the Chrome OS idea was announced in 2009, but the first implementations, the first Chromebooks were in 2011, which probably means that the 2012 is when people are actually starting to see it, right? Initially, Google's idea was the browser is your OS type thing. They didn't have Windows Manager. Pretty much everything you did inside it should happen inside the browser. And that's the idea. Chrome, everyone knows the browser and uses it, maybe. Yeah, sorry, I had to poke. But the issue with that is it kind of was limited. They had these Chrome apps, which I think you can actually still go to Chrome Web Store and get some apps. But officially, Google said that's not the way of the future. We're going away from that. After that, I think it is 2014, they started adding support for Android in Chrome OS. You could actually go to the Play Store and install a Chrome Android app, depending on what your Chromebook was, if it supported it or not. And now they've added the future until they change it is Crostini. So the interesting thing is Crostini. Anyone know what that name means outside this context, this situation?
Right.
Yeah, the little have you ever had those fancy hors d'oeuvres, the little crusty bread things with stuff spread on top of it? Those are Crostini or Crostino, depending on your plural or non-plural.
I didn't know you spelled that.
What's that mean? No. The interesting thing about it is the name is a play on crouton, and what crouton was is this is an off the reservation third party people. Hey, I can hack and put Linux on my Chromebook, and so what they did is with Chrome OS normally it's locked down. In order to do some stuff off the reservation and kind of leave the confines Google wants you to, you put it into developer mode. And at that point, now you can oh, I have this script, let me run my script and do other things. So Crouton, which is how you would play with Linux, you look here and it's you got Ubuntu inside Chrome OS. That landed about 2014, 2013, in that area. And a lot of people loved it. Like, oh, I can take this really cheap laptop, because like Chromebooks were known for like the really cheap, like $200-300 computers, and put Linux on it. And so that wasn't bad. But the thing is, Crostini is actually a sanctioned Google project. So you're not having to leave the reservation and put into developer mode to use Crostini. So with that kind of history and background, if you have a Chromebook, one detail is you cannot, how you can go into browse as a guest is one of your options when you go into it. In order to use Crostini, you actually have to be logged in with a real user account. So in order to do that, to enable it, go there, go to the little settings gear, because you're used to seeing that. And you're going to see Linux beta. You click on that and say turn on. It'll say setup. You'll say install. Then sometime later, it'll be installed. In order to save you the time frame on that, I have another computer where I've gone ahead and installed it. So let me switch that out. Maybe I need to log in before I share my screen. I don't trust you guys, just saying.
That's 7 little circles.
Yeah. Okay, so you should be able to see that. Good. So what happens is once it's installed, what happens is if you go in here, it has one of your applications you're going to see is called Terminal. And Terminal does what you probably expect it to. It gives you a prompt. So when you turn it on, it gives you a terminal. And if you try to look at the what OS flavor you're sitting on top of, it's Debian. So by default, when you enable Linux subsystem in ChromeOS, it'll give you a Debian like little container system. So now, if you want to install any programs, you do your normal apt-get. How many of you have used Debian? I'm assuming the InfoSec space, nearly everyone's at least been exposed to it because of Kali, right? So what happens is you can do apt-get install. And one of the apps I installed is ZenMap. And you can launch it. It'll say, because you're not your root, it will say that maybe you can't do some things. And you can run, ZenMap, which is like a port scanning tool, and it'll reach out and it'll reach like a remote host. Let's go ahead and do this. Maybe dc801.com org, and maybe change the scan settings on here to like say quick scan plus drop. Maybe, and run the port scan.
So when the internet goes down in space, we know why.
Yeah, that's okay. We have to take these type of chances. So
we can kick it.
Now you notice that you install this. It feels like it's not different than ChromeOS. It is a little like it doesn't have quite the Chrome around it. It runs. This application is like an X Windows app, which for those of you who have never done GUI and Linux, it was the long time windowing system. And it comes through, gives you results here, right? Looks like we have an SMTP server. Nice. So, anyways, the evil person, don't. But the issue with this is the inside the container that's running your Linux, Google says we don't trust anything that lives in this environment. So they kind of have it jailed out. Now, so if you want to copy and paste text, you can. So this is inside a Linux container, and I can paste this into something inside ChromeOS. While it's not officially the way it is, this diagram kind of gives you a feel for how it's done. So you have your firmware, your hardware, your kernel. The kernel has KVM. So they basically run a virtual machine that then you run containers and then you run your app inside it. And what happens is this window that you see for ZenMap, that you can run. So basically anything you have in Debian, you can run on a Chromebook now because this is how this works.
Like Kali.
Yeah, like Kali. In fact, I'm going to show you Kali before we're done with this on this machine. So with that, this is like the really simple, not under the hood. You install it, you go to open up terminal, apt-get install your program, and then if you don't ever want to know more or do more, that'll work for you. Now, if you screw things up, because like I never do that, and you're like, man, I think I may have hosed things, you can go back to Linux beta and you can like turn it off. You can remove it, like wipe it, every trace of what you set up. So basically, you can go and play with this and not worry about like the damage you're going to do, which is kind of nice, right? Now, I'm not going to do that tonight. Get rid of that. So you can run applications. Now, if you want to get under the hood a little bit, because things are always more interesting when you dig underneath things. What happens is, let me get rid of this. I'll show you how you can get this. So Control-Alt-T will land you a new browser tab and a cross shell, which is like a shell that the ChromeOS gives you. And if you do Help Advanced.
And this is the shell for the ChromeOS box, not the Debian.
Not the Debian thing. This is actually ChromeOS, nothing to do with the Debian piece. But with some of these commands, like VMC, allows you to kind of see the virtual machine that the Linux subsystem lives in. So, for example, if I do VMC help, it has a few of the commands you're kind of expecting. Like if I do VMC list, by default, when you enable the Linux subsystem, it creates a virtual machine called Termina. And inside Termina is where the containers for your Linux system lives. Now we're kind of looking under the hood a little bit. So if I do VMC start Termina, I'll land myself inside is that a little too low? Maybe there. I'm now inside a Linux virtual machine that's running inside ChromeOS. Now inside that, for each of your containers, you have LXC. So if I do LXC list, the default one, when you set this up, and again, you don't have to know this to use it, but the container inside is called Penguin. And it runs basically a Debian OS inside it. But notice how many of you have ever used or heard about LXC? So like 3 of you. So basically, when Linux started looking at doing containerization, LXC is like one of the earliest projects in this space. And most of you, if you've done containers, how many of you ever touched Docker and done some of that? Like nearly everybody, right? Okay, so Docker, usually when people are talking about, it's application containers. You're having that single thread of execution doing the useful thing. For LXC, it's more of an OS, like it's kind of giving you that OS environment, not really the single thread of execution, more like, hey, I'm in a terminal and I'm doing normal Linuxy things. So the nice thing is, if you see here, you can actually look for additional containers. Well, they gave you the Debian by default. You can do LXC, image, list, and it'll show the ones I've downloaded a few for the purposes of this presentation. Well, I can do LXC, image, list, images. And basically there's a server on the internet where you can say, hey, I want some LXC images. What do you have for me? And it'll go out. I hope the networks have decent. And it'll spit out like a ton of different ones. And you're talking anything from Gentoo to Alpine to Debian, all those things. And one of them is Kali. They actually have a Kali, and they do nightly builds. So these images are actually reasonably fresh. You're not looking for something that's like not been maintained for a while.
It was today or yesterday.
Yeah. So what happens is, if you want to, and you want to run Kali on your Chromebook, you can do LXC launch. Oh, hold on, do about that. And say you'll say images Kali, and then whatever you want the container to be named. Now I'm going to call it Kali, but I'm free to call it foo. In fact, I'll call it foo. And so it'll go. If I don't already have the image downloaded, it'll reach out the thing, suck it all down, and then it'll actually start the container. So if you do LXC list now, I'm going to have two containers. I'm going to have Penguin, which is the default one, and now my other image container, which is called foo. And I can do LXC, EXC, foo, and then bin bash, right? And now I have a terminal inside my Kali. If I cat my Etsy OS, it says, hey, I'm Kali. Now, what's the latest kernel version that Kali's on? It's like 5 dot something, right? For those of you who've been playing with it. If you look at the kernel, you notice it's 4.19. And if I run inside the terminal and do say uname a, it's 4.19. So basically these are containers. You're sharing the same kernel underneath. And so even if you're running Alpine, you're running Ubuntu, you're running whatever OS, you'll be running the same kernel. So
There's a kernel exploit. There's a kernel exploit.
Yeah, it's kind of a free one, right? So the way that works is, all these are containers. Now, if you do IP, if you find the IP address, the virtual machine manages giving out DNS or IP addresses for any of its containers, right? So like you have this 115.92.205, and this is for Kali, right? And if I go IP, we're all basically kind of in the same subnet. So 205 and 204. And say if I'm running a service on one of these. So if I do, say, apt get
The other 203.
Install, say, Apache 2. So I'm installing Apache on the Kali machine, right? And I'll get through here. And if you curl localhost, come on, please.
Gotta unpack the kernel.
Yeah, sorry, curl. No. Okay, not too bad. Well, maybe not. But so it was.
The next kernel thing.
People still use Perl?
Yeah.
Clearly.
Well, it's only for regular expressions, right? Perl and regular expressions. Yeah. So what happens is I'm installing and running a service on one of these containers, a web server, right? So the question becomes, can my containers talk to each other? That'd be kind of cool, right? You can build kind of a little lab, some vulnerable machines, attack machines, have some fun on cheap hardware. Now, one thing while we're waiting for this, one warning is the original Chromebooks, like one of these older ones, they didn't come with 16 gigs of storage or 32 gigs of storage, not a whole lot. So once you start spinning up virtual machines and containers and that, you may want to make sure you're on the hardware that gives you enough space. This is actually a fairly recent Chromebook. I have a 120 gigs on this, so I've got some breathing room. So right now, if I curl, hopefully I have curl on this. Okay, if not, I can install it.
I hope you do too.
Okay, curl's not installed. Okay.
How does Kali not come?
Hey, actually, good question. Excellent question. And I'll explain why. Because it is a container, what happens is, while they have access to all the Kali libraries, they don't actually install any of that to make the image as small as they can get away with it. So that's the reason why. I know why. So if I curl local, and apparently Apache is not running.
Curl. Oh
So-
yeah, service.
Service.
It's service.
Service.
Apache to start.
Apache to start. Okay, so now if I curl, I get a response. Excellent.
Yay.
So now the thing is, we know the IP address of this machine is 204. So we're going to copy, or not copy, and we're going to curl from this machine, which I'll probably have to install because, well, of course. Nope. Containers can talk to other containers.
You can access it on the web too, right? In the
Yeah.
Chrome.
Yeah, in Chrome, you should be able to, let's try that. Yep, and inside ChromeOS. So the thing about it is you get under the hood of Crostini. You could just have used it generically to run your favorite Linux app that you always wish you could run, and it now works. But the thing is, you get under the hood, and there's some opportunities to do some interesting things. Like I think like if you want to create a little lab, again, have like maybe create a Metasploitable, like the little target vulnerable machine in an LXC container, and then run your Kali, install Metasploit, install some tools, and you have a punching box, a punching bag to play with. So, the thing is, that's kind of fun. They're not, Google's not advertising this. They're not explaining this to you. Now, some things about this is you'll hear, if you start following this a little, you'll see next version of ChromeOS, this feature will be available, like USB support or some other thing. And then when it drops, the support won't be there. So I would say, like, when they talk about a bunch of features, but don't count on those features, like, being delivered on time. Like, they've been really wanting USB support because I want to use YubiKey and GPG to do some things with Gmail. And yeah, I'm still waiting. So that is the thing. Now, one resource, say you want to work on something in your Linux container, but have it available in your ChromeOS. Maybe you're using like GIMP to do some image stuff and you want to still have it accessible. By default, once you install the Linux subsystem, you have this Linux files. So there's a file in that folder, and you put it in this folder, and then you go to, say, the container, CD, and else, you're going to see that file.
Is that only in the first container that you set up, or is that also going to be in Kali?
Good question. I don't see it there. Now, here's a kicker, though. There is another way around this. So what happens is you can create folders on your My Files. If you right-click on it, you have a choice that says Manage. Actually, it'll say Share with Linux. And this one I've already enabled sharing with Linux, right? So what happens is in this folder, which is called Tester, you can see it here. So if I go to Mount, Chrome, and then My Files, and then and say Tester, which is that folder, you can see the file, and that's inside the normal pre-built piece, right? But if you want to go inside your Kali one, which we set up here, and we say CD mount Chrome, you can also see it. So you kind of can share files. I don't know if they intended for you to do it this way, but effectively you can like share files between the ChromeOS system, and multiple containers, which is kind of a fun thing to do. You can probably do something interesting with that. So, I don't know how much time I've consumed in this, but the thing about it is I wanted to give you a feel for what you can do, an opportunity to play with this. If you don't want to go out and buy a ChromeOS Chromebook because you don't want to subsidize the empire, I get that. ChromeOS is based on Chromium OS, which is an open source upstream piece. And you can go to it, you can go download the Git repo, build images. I actually built an image for like a Intel NUC based machine, installed it on the SSD drive, and was able to run ChromeOS on like a normal computer. Without all the pre-built piece. Now, it is kind of convenient to take the Google install thing, but you can step off the reservation and play with it. So with that, that's kind of like my prepared content. But the thing is, do you have questions or you want to try some stuff? Go ahead.
Have you tried putting any like BSDs or anything on this instead of Linux, or would that just not work at all?
Because it uses, like, if you go back to the question, it uses KVM. So they don't use, like, if you've ever used some of the normal like KVM tools like Versh and things like that. I'm pretty sure that anything, because Versh can run Windows inside it. I've done it in the past. Now the thing is, right now I think that it'll be hard. I think Google is trying to build this thing up into something that they can support.
And control.
So
Yeah, and control.
there were there's the virtual machine that you put yourself into, and then the virtual machine is what's running all the LXC containers.
Yes.
Could you not have a VM that's also a whole nother OS? Like what is that VM manager doing? How does that work?
Now, yes. So let me get out of one of the containers.
I was kind of curious.
VMC list, right? Because VMC, I'm not out of that yet. Okay. So what happened is the virtual machine, which I'm in right now, is Termina, right? And so it has installed LXC. So if you list the running containers, we have my Kali ones. Now the thing is, if you step up one level and you're back in Crosh, use VMC. If you're ever using KVM, who here has ever played around with KVM? Okay, like 2 or 3. So KVM is like this built into the OS Linux virtual machine tool, like framework, right? Built into the kernel, support near native performance because it's really low level piece of virtualization. So what happens is, instead of using Versh, which is a command you'll be really familiar with if you ever played with the KVM stuff, they've actually created their own virtual machine managing tool, and it's VMC. So what happens is, logically, you think you could like do an import of some type of VM.
Yeah, or
and
there's
run
the
it.
like create from a source media and stuff like
Yeah.
that. I wonder if it has to support the some kind of Debian-ish kernel, the kernel under the OS.
Yeah.
Or under Chromium.
I'm not entirely sure how. It's getting under the hood a little bit even deeper.
Yeah, because I'm wondering if you could like start up a Windows,
Yeah.
Windows on there.
The thing is, I think, as this matures, I think that's like a possibility. One issue with this, and they're trying to add, this isn't a feature list, is to do graphics acceleration. Like if your hardware supports graphics acceleration, they want to kind of build the plumbing underneath it so that your containers can actually use that. And if that comes to play, you can maybe install Steam, because you can do that on Linux, and then run some Steam games on your Chromebook, which would be kind of a fun thing to do.
I really wonder how it works, because there was even flags in there on like enabling, like you can give the VM GPU access. I think.
Yeah.
So
I know they're working on it. It's beta. So now the thing that worries me a little bit about this is, right now they say this is the future. But in the past, you said web apps were the future, and
anybody who says anything's the future is a fool.
yeah, Bill Gates said no one was ever going to need more than 640 kilobytes of RAM. If you remember that statement, you are old, like me. Okay, but that was the 80s. Yeah. So, other questions? Okay, either I was awesome or boring.
No, this was really cool. Thank you, Chris.
Cool. Well, thank you for coming.
How
Appreciate
is
it.
the keyboard on that Chromebook?
This keyboard is chiclet thing, right? I know you're kind of old school.
I like little fake pads. I don't know if I could go to chiplet.
Now, apparently they do have, there is a Chromebook that Lenovo makes that has like the little nibble, you move with your finger, kind of feels like the old Chromebooks, except it still is kind of chiclet type of thing.
Yeah, I bought one of the newer fake pads.
The magic's not there.
it's just not there. The coolest thing about, at a certain point, you can still swap in old keyboards, but then you can't even do that.
Now, I did see a thing where you can take your X220 or those type of things, take the motherboard that, the Lenovo one out, and they third-party produced motherboard that'll fit in the chassis.
Third-party produced.
So,
What?
and here's the thing, you can like run like the more recent like Intel i9, like the really new hardware.
That just shows the extent of how much people love that fucking
Yes.
laptop.
Yeah.
It's like those people that put those giant engines in those old rusty looking trucks and then like take it to a drag race or something.
I resemble
Sleeper.
that. Yeah. So, cool.
That's awesome.
Cool.
Have you come across any limitations in working with Crostini that you would find, well, unworkable in your day job?
Yes. The USB support. One of the things they're wanting to do, and they've actually tried to showcase this in some of like the Google.io where they talked about this a little bit, is they want you to be able to run Android Studio inside the Linux containers to do like your Android development. And now you frequently, in order to do some of the things, you'll hot jack your Android phone, right? And they show it working at the presentation. But when I try to get my USB support, it just is not really there.
How do you manage USBs? Because I see like USB attaching and detaching. Do you have to manually like, I want this flash drive in my container, so I have to like get
Good
what is
question.
that bus number, device number, mount it to the VM.
So yeah, good question.
Oh.
USB preferences, right?
Oh,
And you're supposed to be able to like plug in a device and it shows up and say, yeah, go ahead and attach it.
Okay, so you can do it like that.
It doesn't work right. Yeah. Yeah.
So I have done. I've worked with Chromebooks quite a bit.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
I have done hot reloads from the container to the Android, Android.
The Android
app
Studio.
Well, it was Flutter actually.
Okay. Yeah.
But running on an Android app that was running on the system, and that was pretty
So
cool.
you were able to like from
do like an ADB bridge
Okay.
Nice.
from the container to the Android VM that's running on the.
Were you able to get any other Unix or USB devices, or was it just like the Android phone?
It was just through the container to the emulator running on
So were you doing that with USB or like ADB?
the
ADB controls. Okay, interesting.
It wasn't using any USB.
Okay. So it's some emulator inside.
Yes.
Okay. So the thing about it is, I've seen demos where you have your Android phone and it bridges into your Android Studio and work. They can push APKs back and forth and do some analysis stuff. But when I try to play with it, because I want my YubiKey to work, damn it. And I have my GPG key here, and I want to use GPG with my YubiKey. And man, no joy. Yeah. But the thing is, they always say, they just can't. They say next version will support this, and you just keep waiting. So that's okay. I mean, you can do useful, interesting things, but in the answer to your question, is there some things in this that kind of break? I could probably get around that. I could put my GPG key inside a container. I could live with that, but I have this sexy YubiKey thing. I really want to use it. So it's a good question. Any other questions? Cool. Well, thanks for coming. Appreciate
Thank you, Chris.
it. Yeah.